morning, cellists. Here we are in this week's final lesson on the Swan and on Feuillard study number 13. Now, for technicals today, we've done quite a lot of work about left-hand shapes, shifts and stretches this week. And let's just consider something for the bow and something different in the left-hand technique. We'll start with the bow. I just want you to think about bow speed and its relationship to dynamic. If we just take a G on the D string here as a sort of a nice warm resonant note, and obviously the key note of the Swan, what I propose we do is 4 beats in the down bow and 2 in the up bow for using the full bow. Consequently, of course, you'll use twice the amount of bow on the up bow. Let's just see. Maintain the same pressure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, by maintaining the pressure and we've doubled the speed, you can immediately hear it is louder. Now, what I propose you might try doing is consciously have a crescendo over both bow strokes. And you can hear a very dramatic exponential crescendo as we go into the faster bow stroke with our added controlled crescendo by pressure. Maybe try it on 2 different notes so you can hear the difference. We could start on an F sharp leading to the G. 1, 2. And that perhaps that might help you feel the arrival at the turn around at the point, because I want you to be careful that that's graded still as you change the bow stroke and change the speed, the change of bow direction. You can equally try it the other way around, just for a bit of variety. So we'll try still on a down, the note swapping, and which has a bit more of a dramatic sort of sense of non-resolution. And this is directly going to relate to our use of the bow in bar 21 of the Swan, where we'll be taking, of the 6 beats, we're doing 4 in a down and 2 in the up, just as I've been showing you in this other example, like this. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can see that this is going to therefore create for us an absolutely amazing crescendo, because if you split it half and half, whether it's this exercise or the B at the top, it won't be as dramatic. Let's just try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now I can still get a crescendo, but it's not as exponential, going up more of a gradient rather than a J curve, if you like, in dynamic alteration. And it's the same true at the top here. If we did 3 and 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Obviously, in order to make the crescendo, I'm going to have to work really hard, push to the bridge, try and increase my pressure, because I haven't got bow speed to help me. Whereas if I divide it 4 and 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, much more of a dramatic change there. And that obviously you can work really hard in the down bow stroke as you get into the point. Remembering the forearm muscle helps you there to maximise your initial crescendo as you travel through the first bow stroke, and then you can take it from that pressure point, add the speed, and away you go. It's very exciting. Okay, there's your bow technical. Now the other thing I thought I would directly explore, stimulated by a question from a student, is vibrato. And obviously if you might think about the Swan, how are we going to apply what kinds of vibrato, or in any piece to be fair. You may have sometimes seen amusing versions of the Swan with either a piece of fruit rolled up and down, or one colleague of mine many years ago actually played the whole of the Swan with a football, vibrating it up and down the cello fingerboard. Absolutely amazing. And of course that would give you a completely crazy wobblando rather than a vibrato, more like a... if you imagine just doing that with a fist, maybe. Which is really bizarre. I'm just using my knuckles there for a really tasteless vibrato. Let's consider the facets of a vibrato. We've got amplitude and speed. Potentially you could add finger pressure in that mix, but let's not go there. Let's just look at those two factors. So we could have nothing at all. And if we just took the first three notes of the Swan for this example, nothing at all, icy cold, gives you a chill down the neck there. And it could be what you want, and maybe you'd like to experiment with that. Or you could add alterations. You could begin cold with none, and then gradually add something in. And I mean, that's quite a common use of vibrato and non-vibrato, the swapping from one to the other, where you might arrive warm and go to cold. That might be on the last note, say, or vice versa, as I've just demonstrated. So don't forget, no vibrato is always an option in your palette of colour. Now, in terms of what I mentioned, amplitude and speed. So amplitude is how wide the vibrato is, backwards and forwards. If it's full width and slow, that's when we get the hideous version that I showed you at the beginning, where it sounds a bit like a fire engine or something, where we've got this full width wobble, the amplitude, and a very slow speed. There are not many occasions you'll want that sound, but it's in our palette. Then we might use the wide vibrato with a medium speed, which again is a bit of a romantic sound there. I've speeded it up a bit with the same amplitude, and really fast, but as wide as you can. Obviously, demonstrating this on the little finger is a little bit more curtailed in what we can do with that compared with the third finger. I'm just taking that as a kind of awkward example from the very beginning of the Swan. Now, in terms of, fast and wide, it may be that this B that we were looking at with the crescendo could be a candidate for fast and fairly wide. Let's just see. Not initially, but as you get to the peak. So moderate to start with then. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, that might be too much. But if you don't explore, you won't know what you think is too much, and maybe you'll then underdo it. So a little bit of thinking about where we might use that. Now back to the amplitude situation. So we've looked at wide in slow to fast. The fast and wide is exhausting, and there'll be really not that many places where that's most useful. I think probably in powerful 19th century concertos, and obviously 20th century. There's a lot more power and energy typically in the drive of the instrument in that period. Looking at the Swan application, probably there isn't anywhere for really wide and fast. I think it's just a bit too much. But let's look at other amplitudes. So if you have a much narrower amplitude, we could go slow and narrow, and that actually provides something that we could say we might like. So that could be quite a nice, slightly warmer temperature of water, if you like, at the opening of the Swan, rather than nothing. A narrow slow could work. I mean, the thing is in that you can hear quite a sort of, you can hear the wave of that oscillation, and I think it may be a little bit too slow. So I suspect we want something a little bit faster, but perhaps as narrow as that. So it's extraordinarily gentle. And of course, all the while, in terms of vibration, we're looking at, if you can just see my forearm wobbling gently. It is definitely an arm movement from the whole of the forearm. Just imagine your hand doesn't exist, it's just an arm. And the fingers just happen to be at the end of that arm, so that you could play any finger, and the arm is perpetually vibrating the whole time. Okay, that's just a little reminder. It's an entire arm action, not just a fingertip action. Okay, so back to our amplitude and speed variations. So we've looked at narrow and slow is, maybe not quite what we want here, but it's something to be practiced. Then we could try narrow and medium. That's getting nearer to something we might like to apply. And narrow and fast. And you can hear much more of a tension. sitting in there, and it's fantastic for creating dramatic tension in a very low dynamic. That would be very exciting. I don't think that's quite what we want here, because I don't think the swan is agitated by punters on the cam who are ignoring them, and they might get in the way. Local story. Anyway, so I think that probably very fast and narrow isn't what we want in this piece, but it's a really good idea to practice it to see you can hear what the choices are. Then something in between. So we've had narrow, we've had wide, and we've looked at the various speeds there. But you could have something that's sort of in between on the amplitude, a little bit more wobble in the arm there, and we could do, if we did that slowly, then you can hear obviously more of this wow 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 wow, which isn't really quite what we want. So I think you need to speed up if you go for a moderate amplitude. And then we're coming now to something that's perhaps more of an instinctive vibrato speed and amplitude for most applications, without us thinking about it, just going, oh yeah, we like that, we respond to what we hear. And that's basically medium amplitude and a medium to fast speed. You could have medium and faster. It's getting a little bit more keen and frenetic, and maybe something worrying is going to happen. That could perhaps be useful at the top, and when we've arrived, that could be quite a nice combination of moderate amplitude and a bit of speed at the very top there. And certainly for the B, I suspect we're looking at moderate amplitude and good speed, at which could increase like this. Maybe. If we were then thinking about the end, now instinctively for this very gentle thing, I am looking at a reasonable good speed and a moderate to narrow amplitude. Maybe to nothing. You could be bleak with nothing here, or very, very tiny vibrato. Keeping it really close, really, really, really tight. So there's a lot of choice, really, and you need to always, I think, explore the boundaries of which basically take us perhaps to something tasteless, or certainly it could be an appropriate application for the piece you're working on. But try all these possibilities and sort of to find out what's available to you for colour, if you like, tonal colour. I think it probably gives you enough of an idea of how you can explore the vibrations. I mean, maybe one other point when we think about the opening is I would probably instinctively look to go for something that's actually giving away the underlying pulse. So it could be a semiquaver, kind of da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 da, that the hand is vibrating within the semiquaver. Or a triplet, you feel, which it gives it a slightly slower, calmer feel. Maybe it's a little less obvious about where the oscillation is. So, you can consider also within the speed idea of it, how it relates to the pulse of the piece, and actually create a division within the pulse, which can be useful, say in chamber music playing, if you're just playing a note, leading in with a note. I've given the pulse 1, 2, 3, 4 within the vibration of my hand in that sound wave that you're creating, and then your other players will know what the pulse is by that sound. Plenty to think about. Let's just finish off Feuillard's study. We haven't got many bars of this to go, and there's not a huge amount in this last portion really. We've arrived at the C string in the 4th position, and we're taking an immediate shift back to the same note in the 1st position as we did in bar 6 and 8, 9. Okay. coming to its final end point. We've got these hopefully clean shifts to the same note on a down bow, and the next bar, same thing on an up bow. You might just notice that in yourself and just check that they are equally as comfortable whether you're doing a down or an up. You could, as I was trying there, apply some of your vibrato ideas to this study to make it a bit more interesting, because it is not got a huge amount in it. Just thinking of the overall study then, so we're looking at trying to be really calm and legato, with having but quick shifts that are occurring to make sure we don't have too much in the way of any sound of gliss between the shifts. But maybe we could also, as previous studies, consider it in a musical way. You know, what shape can you put in? Shall we try and see? Let's see what we might make of it then. I missed a bar. I was sort of looking backwards and forwards and sort of imagining about colour and shape. I sort of looked up and thinking, well, I don't actually know which bar I'm in now, so I might have skipped one. Apologies if that was true. But the idea is, in a study, having thought about all, breaking it down and what the technical things are that we're learning, is, you know, just go with the flow then and see what happens if you apply other ideas. So in that, we're sort of trying to like create some character, choosing different vibratos, got a bit over dramatic in bar 6, 7 there, thinking about our wide and crazy vibratos, and then a bit mysterious as we went through the chromatic section, like it's a bit eerie, doesn't know where it's going. And in all of these things you can be trying out bow speed and vibrato, dynamic, and all of these different attributes can suddenly bring what might be quite a boring study to life. Okay, hope you enjoy an interpretation. Right, we've got now the final phrase of the Swan today, and it's no surprise at all of what we're doing here at bar 21, because we've really been looking at it already in the technicals, and that is that we are on this very long B, 6 beats long, and we are dividing the bow not halfway, as I've explained, so that we have an exponential crescendo, in other words very dramatic, so that we're ready for the very passionate final descent. Okay, so we start here with a 4 beats then 2. Now in that second bar, 22, we're doing 2 and 1, 2 and 1, which we have covered in other Feuillard studies. So obviously there's an intenseness in the 2 beats, and then a faster, slightly lighter bow to get back without it being heavy, because the lean is definitely on the down bow. We don't want to just use the same pressure on that up bow at twice the speed there, because it's going to be ugly. So be careful of that. We lighten up the pressure. And here is my other version of the fingers crossing the string. If you remember at the opening we had 1, 2 sitting right over the top of the nail of the first finger. This time we're turning the hand, pivoting this way, so my elbow goes back, so that I can get a nice clean 5th legato here. And the idea is you can still vibrate on both of them, make them lovely and smooth. Now at this point I like to move to a 3rd finger so we can get the colour and tone of the vibrato, because as we mentioned at the, in the vibrato exercise in today's lesson, the 4th finger is going to be a little bit harder. It's a much narrower, lighter, smaller finger than the others. We can get a little bit more variety of our tonal colour in the 3rd finger here, certainly the warmth. Now personally I like to come to the A string here for a clarity of sound, something pure and more like clear water, if you like. Some play here. Which you could do, but for me I feel this one might be submerging at this point, perhaps got in the weeds. Anyway, I mean it's your choice, but personally I like the clarity and purity of the long A string sound here. It's got a lot of resonance. Possibly I slowed up a bit too much at that point. On the arrival note, that is a slowing up. Imagine you're unravelling, maybe a clock is winding down. 1, 2, 3. Now this second half of the bar, you will notice it says lento over the top, so it's not just keep on slowing down as you have been, but really it's immediately slower. So the best thing in your mind really is to imagine that each of those crotchets is a minim. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're applying the writ as well, and arrive. Maybe cool and bleak or a tiny bit of vibrato. This has got to be a very long stroke. How many? It's actually 9.5 beats, so you've got to count to the number 10 before you're allowed to lift your bow off the string. I have no idea if that was 10 or not because I was talking at the same time. But it's quite, I think it's nice to get that in one bow stroke and not to change it, not to be arriving up and change to down or vice versa. And you can do it. Really, the thing to do is to give yourself a challenge. Can you actually make it last even longer than that? And of course, if you move a fraction nearer to the bridge, you can last longer on less bow with a tiny bit more pressure. Not too much because it's quite quiet. So let's just see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Probably could do, We're not actually going to do that long. We're only going to get up to imagining, hearing in your head the 10th count and stop there, which is basically 9.5. And there's a reason he's put the final tie onto a quaver. He doesn't want you to stop short. He wants you to overlap into that second half of the bar and only then whisper away. If you run out of bow before then, don't give it away in your face, will you? Your performance. So maybe a run short, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh dear. But just hold the posture and just fraction above the string. And if you've been really, really quiet, maybe your audience is listening thinking, oh, are you still playing? And hold the position. And to be honest with you, you need to hold the position anyway whilst your pianist plays to the end, or the orchestra, or whoever is accompanying you, your harpist perhaps. And that, it could be too long to hold all the way through to the very end, but start with the hold and then very slowly, in the kind of tempo of the piece, you might just close your wings, if you like, and come to rest as you just listen to the final notes of your accompanist. And all these factors, in performance art are important. You don't want to finish as I've finished. It destroys the whole atmosphere. So all your body movements need to be in time and in mood of the piece. And that's my top tip to you. Okay, so let's have a look. This fragment today then from 21. Maybe we'll go from 20. I've no idea if the recording picked up, but there were birds in my garden that I could just hear at the end of that. Great. I shall be uploading the whole cello line tomorrow, and I'm actually exploring at the moment creating the backing track of a version that I performed some years ago, which was with a harp and muted sustained strings, and it's a really lovely colour combination if I can get it to work. Otherwise I'll probably create my own piano backing track and have a go with that. Anyway, watch the space. See you next week. Bye.